Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the October 31st Halloween discussion, post-chapter discussion of chapter 8.50 of The Wandering Inn. A couple of things for administrative purposes. One, if you do not want to speak or cannot speak, please use the general chat to type. If you'd like to make a comment specifically to something that's going on in the actual conversation, you can at me, and I will go back and reread what you said and bring it up as a topic. The schedule was posted in the original document, original post for this, but I will repost it right now. We're going to do an intro, a recap. We're going to have an open discussion about your first impressions of the chapter, and then we're going to go through some questions that have been submitted by folks through DMs, and that will be the bulk of it, and we will then end it, and I'll stop the recording. We're recording this in case you didn't know. And we'll have about 30 minutes with... We'll have 30 minutes where we just have conversations, just a free-form conversation. Um, yeah, so let's get started. Okay.
Rock on.
One more, just an etiquette rule. Just be polite. If you end up speaking over someone, it's okay. Just take a moment. I will organize it so you have a chance to speak. And if we go over on time, it's fine. We're just trying to have a nice conversation. If you need to leave, feel free to leave. It would be polite to say bye before you do. But other than that, yeah, let's get started. Um, that's the intro. So we're going to go into the recap. So it's chapter 8.5. There was no letter for this, which was interesting. It was just 8.50. So it was a mainline chapter. And we start by checking in with Pelt, who's watching the grand arbitration on the scrying orb on Wistrom News Network. He declares there will be blood and discusses the adamantium auctions. And we find out he's pretty grumpy without Kevin around, more than he usually is. Then he examines the newly found Demos metal, which his apprentice managed to secretly procure for him, and remembers Demastel, the smelter. And his section ends with Pelt seeking redemption, like him stating that he seeks redemption. And that is what he thinks Demastel managed to find. We shift views to Aelin Damas and the Viscount Visafison. He gets dressed to go meet Ryoka with the Baron that we've met before, who was in charge of all the knightings. And then we switch again to Iterin II, who's having a rough time. He begins having a conversation with one of the members of the five families and is kind of stuck in a weird diplomatic morass. We talk about pudding for a little bit. And he's also really depressed and angry because Feshi won't let him on to the grand arbitration on TV. And he's really sad about that. And yeah. Then his kids ask to be allowed to learn trick moves from Ryoka, and he goes to see what she's up to and what his kids are all on about. He takes them with him, and he asks a scholar to come to help determine the classes his kids could get. And just, he's curious, he's looking over Ryoka, and he's realizing that she doesn't have any classes, and she's able to pull all of this off, despite having this green band that's supposed to block magic. He has a discussion with Ryoka, and is charmed by her, because of course, and get some advice on managing immortals. And the two of them trade information on the fact that, yes, they both know immortals and know how to deal with them. And the scene ends sort of ambiguous, because one of the things that happens is that Iterin gives parole to Samiel, and Samiel comes and talks to the princess and immediately declares that Ryoka is not a slut, and that Plants for Girls is practical. Bad impressions all around. The maids think that Ryoka might be trying to make a move on Iterin. And then we move to Ryoka visiting with Vithia and the other immortals, discussing the coinage that Oberon gave her and the provenance of all of the different immortals that are here. There's a mermaid, the Gryphon that's there. And then, in the middle of the discussion, or at least partway through, the Viscount Bisafison arrives and tries to introduce himself to Ryoka. And she freaks the fuck out, because she can see that he is, at least he seems on the surface level, like the devil. Like a particular type of image that she has of what a devil is. She freaks out, she runs away, because of course, and tries to calm down, find out what he is. She talks to different people, and he keeps popping up everywhere. Vicificin, the Viscount, thinks that it's all a game, and he hunts her like it is. And he thinks it's hilarious. It's the equivalent of a boy pulling the pigtails of a girl, at least on the surface, until you start looking a little bit deeper. A bunch of people in the court join in, pranking her, hounding her, until eventually she's caught by a bunch of mages, webbed, frozen, terrified, and Vicificin is like brings her a flower, and the queen arrives, Oina, and she immediately realizes what's going on and like rounds up, slaps Vicificin across the face, saves Ryoka, figures out that yeah she's no threat to her as far as the king is concerned, and invites her to dinner, or possibly invites her to dinner. Vicificin feels bad because the queen makes him realize that he's being incredibly rude, and he's hurt his reputation in the meantime. Then the last scenes are... oh, no, before that, what happens is that later on, Iturin and Risvari, the Wyarm, are having a conversation, and he's nonplussed at why the queen was pissed about the chasing of Ryoka. And then Ryoka arrives and challenges basically all the immortals to a game of tag, and she flies away using her magic, and Risvari chases her, and they have an aerial combat, and in the process, at the end of it, Ryoka manages to convince Risvari to have a meeting before the winter solstice, which is when he wanted to have the meeting. Then Ryoka goes back to her room, aching but triumphant, and finds an offer for tea with Vicificin. And Ryoka has tea with Vicificin and dances with him under the moonlight, and reveals quite a few things between them, and comes to some kind of detente. All is forgiven, and thus the chapter ends. Anybody think I missed anything?
I'm not sure about the all is forgiven part.
Well,
but the tent I'll give you.
Yeah,
there are some parts that I think you interpreted differently than some of the rest of us did, but we'll get into that.
Well, yeah, we'll get into that. But did I miss any events that were of significance?
Did Risvari really say that he planned to have their meeting at the winter solstice?
He did mention in a prior chapter that he was planning to engage in, like, he wanted to have the meeting during the winter solstice. And he wanted all of his affairs in order before he did anything, because he wanted to be absolutely sure he had the most advantageous position. Or at least that was the impression I got. Did I talk too fast?
And
Anybody?
also
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Gunman.
I was going to say that, and also the fact that that's when the fairies show up, so he would be able to just directly talk with them.
Mm-hmm.
The quote was, "Gotten Risvari to commit to a meeting before winter."
Before winter, yeah. But I assumed it applied to the winter solstice, because that was the only significant thing.
No, he just needed the Fae to be there, and they're there as long as winter is around. It doesn't have to be on the solstice itself.
Yeah. My assumption was something about the solstice, but yeah. Because then you could travel between planes and whatnot. Stuff. Okay. So...
Real quick, one thing that I kind of thought you skipped over a little bit.
So this is Neil talking, right?
Important.
Neil? Just say your name before you talk so other people know who it is. This is Neil.
Yes, Neil. The one thing in the very beginning that I kind of thought you skimmed over a little bit that I found significant was Pelt discussing the mastery of metals with his apprentice, because that gave us some world building that we hadn't seen previously.
Yes. Okay. So we're gonna get into that. We're gonna start right away. So Asteria asked the question: didn't the Fae get kicked out by the gods, though? Are they even showing up like Kel said? The response to that is, I believe winter did show up in the south. So if that happened, then that means the Fae did arrive and usher in winter. So they are definitely still keeping to their bargain. It's just that they're only allowed certain ways to interact with the world. They can't come in just willy nilly. That's why the gates are shut. Okay.
The south would be Israel, and it's summer right now.
No, that's not there. I remember there was winter came to Belarus. Wasn't it mentioned that winter came to Belarus?
No.
That was way before, wasn't it?
Wasn't it? I could have sworn. I'm apparently wrong. I can be wrong. Yes.
Yeah, I don't remember that either.
Are you talking about winter coming this year or previous years?
Upcoming.
Upcoming, yeah. Like winter's upcoming. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think winter's come anywhere this season yet.
No, it does show up at the same time everywhere. Okay, I'm completely thinking of something wrong. But okay, before we get down the rabbit hole.
You're thinking of actual Earth, where it splits, but we don't have any evidence of that.
Yeah,
like,
we
the
don't.
Wandering Gate as of yet.
Yeah. Okay. So
That
if
was also. Oh, sorry.
if let's.
I was just gonna say that was also a major argument against the planet being round in one of the Westrom discussions.
Yes, it was.
Was the fact that winter arrives everywhere simultaneously.
They assume. They assume it arrives everywhere because they can't see the other side of the world.
I thought they knew that.
Well, no, and this is Lynette. Baleros actually has missed winter a time or two because the Fae got distracted and just never showed up on that continent. Nears mentions that way back in volume 2.
Yeah, so that's peak Fae. But
Actually, Mr. Europe, actually, does that mean they show up from the east?
I don't know.
Do they travel east to west?
Okay, I'd like everyone to, if they want to give their general impressions and point out particular aspects of the chapter that were interesting, I'd like you to just ping me if you want to say something, and we're gonna go through each person, and I'll be the first one to start to give you an idea of what I'm looking for, and then you go ahead and ping me if you want to start. So for me, this chapter was, nice is the only way I could describe it. It felt very nice.
What?
Hang on, Lynette. Let me finish. Okay. So what I mean by nice is that it didn't really move the plot. It didn't really do much at all from my perspective, but it gave us some new views of people, deepened our understanding of Aelin Damas, allowed us to interact differently with people. There was definitely a very Halloween-y feel. Pirate was trying to give us a little Halloween-y feel, but there was definitely some terror in there. But overall, it just felt nice to me. I got to see a little bit of dwarf stuff and confirmation that, yes, he's connected to the Smelter Damastel. There was the implication that there are different immortals and they have different ideas about what to do. There's a motivation behind the creation of Aelin Damas. There's hints of there's depth given to everyone, and that's it. For me, it was just that was my impression of it. Okay, Dado, if you want to give your impression.
Sorry about that. This is Dado.
Dado, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. You can say either. It's based off the SCP. So my impressions of the chapter was a lot of world building because for the longest time, I had a lot of questions because we found out that basically I don't even know how to say this man's name, and I feel so bad for Andy having to pronounce whatever that is. The devil.
Viscount Vicificent. Viscount Vicificent. That's it.
Oh God. Okay. Well, I'm not gonna say his name, but there was a lot of stuff we didn't know if there were any devils or demons because that was kind of a thing that I think a lot of people questioned of whether or not the demons of Rear were actual demons or not. And I liked all the world building with the metal, and I think we got to see a lot of that because that was I think we're going to see more of that, especially with they're discovering more alloys and like the comparisons between titanium and a bunch of the other earth metals. I think that will lead into some stuff later of whether or not they're actually rediscovering things, because I mean, who knows? Earth as a whole had a completely different way of smithing compared to a magical world. They don't use all the same things, so some metals may be actually new to in-world. I don't know, would plastic be considered a new invention, or like even close to metal to them? And then the second thing is the whole demon chase with Ryoka was, in my opinion, terrifying. If I was in that position, and I love demons and like the whole like devil and like all that stuff, but that would be absolutely terrifying. And I think it was kind of fucked up that I don't even know, the Duke and the rest of the Immortals were kind of just like shrugging it off, saying, "Oh, that's it's kind of funny." And that's kind of a thing that's been being explored, is that they, even though they're immortal and they rule over a bunch of mortals, they have like they don't really see the same way that they do, and that's just kind of expected, but it's also kind of terrifying, because even the Lucifan or whatever they're called the Shoal clan. Mm-hmm. How they talk about it, how he describes that his nature is that they don't really feel empathy, and then there's kind of like a weird discourse of that between her and Ryoka, because Ryoka's like, he had like a guilty look when he realized that he offended her.
But the guilt wasn't necessarily because he felt guilty for being a certain way. It was more, he described it, he lacks, there is actually, just give me a moment here. There's actually a mental condition, like a condition, where there are people who lack the level of emotional empathy.
Antisocial disorder, or not antisocial, what is it? It's the one, it's like the one that we...
Sorry.
Yeah, but there's a specific name for it.
Yes, there is. No, not psychopath. These are people who are able to experience the emotion, but not at the level that we do. It's very, very muted.
Psychopaths you have it diagnosed with them normally, but it's not psychopathy.
It's not psychopathy. The difference between a psychopath and... there was a television example. If anybody ever watched the show, the one with the AI... God, I can't remember it. It was a CBS show. No, it was a CBS show. God. Sarah Shahi was the person who was playing the character of it, and she had that particular condition, and it was described essentially as, I can experience all of the emotional gambit, but I just can't experience it the same way you do, or even at the intensity that you do.
I understand that, but at the same time, even people like Riversea, or I don't even know how to say his name because I don't pronounce them in my head, but they don't even when they were explained to it, they didn't even see anything wrong with it, and I think it's more of an immortal thing. And I think some of the immortals, they seem to empathize with Ryoka and maybe some of the younger ones, but it was it's really terrifying, this idea that they're ruling over these people, but they actually have like and the Lucifan, the Clan Shoal, they're doing good things for the humans, but it comes down to can you really empathize? And also, that's another question of mine, is I know that generally what we've seen so far for most immortals is that they can't level, and that's like kind of a trade-off, but is that the case for all of them?
I don't know. Well, we'll ask. We'll have a question part to discuss that, but it's more about is that your impression? Is that it?
I mean, yeah, that was basically my impression of the entire thing.
Cool. Thank you, Discinator. We're going to have Kermit come up. Action, Kermit.
Yes, hi. So, my reading of that particular section was that Visokusen, or however you pronounce his name, was capable of feeling all those emotions, but it was more the situation that a predator that empathizes with their prey doesn't eat, so by natural selection, he can't really feel that for humans. He has all those emotions, but, they're natural-born human-hunting predators.
Okay, so, what did you think of the chapter, though? Was there anything particular that jumped out at you?
Let's see. Yeah, I guess some of the stuff I was thinking about was already covered in other ways. The game of tag with Risveri was actually pretty funny. So when Ryoka was like running across the scales and stuff, that was all very dramatic.
Did it
Honestly, my
remind
favorite
you of
part the
anything?
chapter was the discussion of pudding.
Did it remind you of anything? The scene evoke anything in particular for you?
Reminding me of things. Well, there's a kind of a tension there because, this whole situation would have gone way better for Ryoka if she hadn't been introduced in the worst possible way, and that was really all on the matriarch. So, there's that conflict where, Ryoka would, sort of pretty naturally fit right in, but there's this whole problem that, first impressions, I got introduced by sneaking into your vault without even knowing where I came from.
I guess.
And I'm not sure that even all of the immortals at Island Damas even know that Ryoka had no control over where she was going to end up by the time she bought back into the mortal world there. She just knew that she was near something that would help.
Okay.
They're all assuming that she snuck into their vaults on purpose instead of stumbling by accident.
So that was your general impression of the chapter? You didn't... did you like it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, my favorite part of it was the discussion of pudding, because that was awesome. But
the pudding discussion? What did you like about the pudding discussion?
I don't know. Sometimes I fixate on things that are relatively minor.
No, what you fixate on is what we want to know about. What made you...
Geez. Well, it was something that's very relatable because, it is easy to do something to death. And, you don't think about that in the context of being a ruler where you can just casually say something and then have everybody try to dump something that you kind of like on your head constantly. So, that's dealing with the pressures of society. And, that sort of happens to us from advertising. We're not sovereigns, but, there's people who are constantly out there doing internet research to find out what exactly you're interested in. And then, you could buy something on Amazon and then they suddenly decide that you're an aficionado for every possible type of chair instead of just wanting to buy one lawn chair.
Okay, Kermit. Thanks for the impression. We're gonna move on to Discinator. So, what did you think of the chapter?
So, I thought it was an interesting thing on reflecting over the chapter. I realized that while I was reading it, I felt probably a greater variety of emotional responses than most other chapters, because it had curiosity around things like the metalsmith, and some of the details around the immortals, a lot of compassion for a lot of the immortals who aren't Risveri and vice versa. And, there was a lot of, I laughed a lot. I was in mortal fear during the chase scene. It was...
So the chase scene didn't feel fun to you in any way?
Not after the first bit. Not after the first bit. After the first bit, it was this is absolutely horror. On the comedy to horror line, it started out as a lot of comedy for the first minute. By the time it got to a public space, it was absolute horror.
Okay.
It was, yeah.
What interesting points did you mentioned the immortals? What interesting points jumped out to you about the immortals?
I think so. Having them, learning about the relative ages, learning just how much or not involved some of them are in the big scheme. Someone's mentioning the vault thing. I don't think most of the immortals know that Ryoka broke into the vault and is a thief. And learning about Fythia's forest, nebulous ways that the stones might help them. So kind of learning about what they want, learning that they all kind of follow Risveri as this leader, but they're not really a unified in what they want. There's not a...
It felt more... I'm guessing you're talking about the fact that it felt more as if the Immortals were a diverse group and they had ages and different ideas of what the Empire... Right. They were just working together. It was more like a confederacy than a union, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay.
And they've got their own things. And the interesting thing that I feel like is the other interesting thing I feel like is shown here is that I think she can make deals with each of them individually, is the thing I'm feeling like. She doesn't have to go, all right, Immortals, represented by Raspberry, you get this and I get this. She can think about, does Bithia have something that's worth a stone or worth her time or something? And then later on, does Visafessin have something that's worth her time or worth a trade that doesn't necessarily involve Raspberry?
Okay. So, wait, I have Asteria then Lem. Asteria, did you want to speak? I'm not sure. You asked if I said lick or like. I'm not. What?
That was a while ago.
Okay.
Don't worry
I'm
about
going through the pings, so if you ping me, I'm gonna assume you want. Okay. So I guess she doesn't want to speak. So Lem, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
All right. Come on up. What did you want to say about the chapter? What were your impressions of the chapter?
For the first bit, it mirrored most of your guys' impressions, but once we got to Randria, I felt increasingly conflicted about Ryoka's point of view and sort of the general feeling of the whole thing. Like, the devil was funny, the immortals are always interesting, but it's difficult to have the sort of like the patience and I don't know, I guess the sort of this peaceful scenery at the castle, where everyone's nice and everyone is like a real person, and I don't know, and the poor king who enjoys his pudding, while he's actually waging war against the rest of Terrandria. And the fact that the war is sort of mostly off screen and not really addressed ever, that really, like, I don't know, it
No, I felt the same thing. Remember, I at the beginning I said it felt nice. It felt like.
yes, and I think it's wrong that it felt nice too.
Why was it wrong to feel nice?
Because why does she get to be like this carefree in a situation where at the same time thousands of people are dying?
Right? Like, I get that. The overall view is that there's this war going on and there are these terrible things happening, and we're here in a nice little field talking to a bunch of immortals who are sad and pretending that they don't have the ability to crush everybody. I get that feeling. I can understand that disconnect, but did that feel like it made the chapter weaker, stronger? Did it was it jangling in your mind like it didn't fit?
Near the end, I think it got weaker.
Okay.
When they actually addressed the morality of the whole thing.
Okay.
Talked to the devil, and started off by mentioning the war and the fact that what he's doing is unprovoked aggression. And then he hit her with a bunch of whataboutism and told her about how like people in his country don't starve and they're really good and shit. And in reality, they're killing everyone who is not part of their budding empire or wannabe empire or whatever you want to call it.
Is that true though? The impression I always got is that they're waging the war, annexing the territory, and then absorbing the populations. It's very much a colonialist POV. I definitely hear that from ULM, but here's a small rebuttal to that impression. The end of the chapter is more the devil trying to make an offer to her in the most like he honest way he knows how, which is through whataboutism and lies and bits. He's sort of trying to show who he is because he wants her on his side. And when you get to that point, you see that you have to see the scene as a conversation between the two of them, and more about do they trust each other than it is about an open commentary on the conflict itself. But I'm guessing you saw it as an open commentary on the conflict, right, Lem?
Well, I think she sort of gave away way too much, way too early. Why did she shake his hand in the first place? Why not flip him off and run away a bunch more?
You think that would have made the story stronger?
I don't understand why in like earlier chapters and up to this point I feel like she's been displayed as someone who was sort of very principled and tries to do the right thing despite it being somewhat, a lost cause and all that. The whole thing with Volume 7 where she did the run, for literally no good reason.
Okay.
And others were more qualified and everything. She did
Okay.
anyways.
So I saw a couple of pings. People have comments on this particular subject, or are you trying to get to give us a general impression? I'm not sure. If you wanted to speak about,
to get into it, yeah. General impression was just is done pretty much.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have 2 more people go, and that'll be the end for general impressions, and then we can discuss anything else. We'll open it up to discussing commentary on people's impressions. So I believe Mr. Europe wanted to go.
Yeah, I love the chapter personally, and I thought there were a ton of very small moments that were great, like the Titan going, I don't want to learn how to fight. I want to play in the garage with my band. And when the Thirsting Veil Knights, of course, were great. When there were small little moments throughout the chapter, and they were realizing it felt like they were just now starting to realize there's a bunch of weirdos in control of the country, behind the scenes, when they were reacting to the devil, really starting to wonder what the hell is going on with these people. Yeah.
Okay. Who else was that? Excuse me for a second. It was Asteria? Yeah, hi, go ahead.
It was me. Yeah, so my first impression, or general impressions of the chapter, were that there were definitely elements that I liked. I really liked the starting off with the dwarf scene. I thought that whole thing was kind of very well done, and it sort of connected back to a lot of, I like the world building, which I think you mentioned earlier. The rest of the chapter had its moments, but I agree with, I think, who spoke before, Mr. Europe, that it definitely ended on a weaker note. And the primary thing that kind of stood out to me was that Ryoka's characterization was just all over the place.
Did it feel Why did it feel all over the place? Excuse me.
I think that was actually part of my discussion questions that I sent you. So without going into too much detail, because I think we're going to get to them later.
We will definitely get to all the discussion questions before we end.
Yeah. But just Ryoka's characterization was kind of all over the place, and that kind of weakened her elements of the chapter, especially with the devil interaction and her interaction with the Duke. For me, that was kind of the drawbacks of the chapter. But I like the dwarf part. I like the pudding part. I thought those characterizations were spot on. So
you felt like the lighter aspects were more compelling than the more dramatic ones?
I saw elements. There were some really great, I could see elements of a really great chapter, like the Immortals versus Mortals scene. I thought there were elements of the devil interaction that were potentially starting to come through, but there were definitely pieces of it that I felt weakened the chapter, and so we're kind of left with a little bit of.
Yeah, I can generally get that feeling. I understand where that's coming from.
Yeah, I like the chapter, but it's not a stronger one.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a stronger one to you. That's fair. So that'll be the end of first impressions. I'm gonna give everyone we're gonna spend about 20 minutes just discussing, opening up to questions about the first impressions and stuff, and then we'll move on to the question corner. So, I know there was a couple of people who pinged me wanting to speak. Alabaster, you wanted to say something?
On the first impressions front,
yeah,
I would second someone was talking about how spooky it was. I found it really frightening, especially because the demon Vicky, whatever you want to call him,
Vicivicin, yes,
literally years old, and that he just doesn't get why what he's doing would be creepy.
I refuse to call him Vicky for those in the chat trying to insist I do that. I apologize, Alabaster. Go ahead.
It just kind of creeped me out that he just didn't understand why what he was doing.
I think it was meant to. That disconnect in perspective is more frightening, because how do you connect with somebody who just will never understand you on that level because their view is so deeply different, right? Okay, so I'm going to start off with, since we just had Asteria go, we're going to start off with her question in the question corner. So here I'm going to read it verbatim. Question: the scene between Queen Oina and Ryoka seem to indicate that there is a power imbalance between the genders on Terandria, which we haven't seen elsewhere. In a world of levels and skills that seems to equal the playing field, gender discrimination doesn't seem to have been an issue that really exists prior to this chapter. Why does it exist on Terandria? What was your reaction to the transition between Ryoka being restrained and terrified to quickly, boldly confronting Rasvari? How would the moonlight scene change if it had been told primarily from Ryoka's perspective, rather than Vicificent? Sorry. If you want to say something, this is an open forum, so just either ping me or just start talking and say your name.
As for Europe, start with. I mean, there's definitely been some power imbalance. There's been a lot of sexual harassment in chapters in Selim and later in Israel, with like in the bar and on the road from Israel, the building road. There's but the gender imbalance is also specifically in Terandria, I think, because of the classes. That's the same thing with like princess and prince. When they power game them, it's the same thing with ladies. That one has a combat advantage, or is easier to make into combat advantage, and one is easier to make into social skills. I think.
Okay. Dado, you had something you wanted to add to the conversation?
Yeah, this is Dado. So for me, I see a lot of gender difference in Terandria, and you can even see that in Israel, because a lot of the human nobility in Israel originally came from Terandria, but you don't see the gender difference in royalty as much in places like, even when there are humans, like in Chandrar. Now, I don't know if it's been established if Chandrar, the humans from Chandrar also originally came from Terandria at some point, but it seems like the humans and most of the nobility in kingdoms and like how it works out in Terandria or Chandrar has been established a lot longer than the nobility in Israel.
Right.
And you see that you've seen that changed a lot in Israel recently because of the Kreeler Wars and the Goblin King, and that a lot of the female nobility has taken on more of a stronger role. Now you have obvious, like, you know, a lot of like the females now are more in charge, where it seems like prior to everything beforehand, it seemed like the males were the heads of the house, where it's kind of different now. And I don't know, you mean, it could be a lot of things, like a lot of the times that we see a lot of the people leading the military still in these human nobilities seem to all be males. You see exception to that, like, was it Welfare?
In Welfare, but the Welfare, again, is an exception because it seemed to be represented, like, she was the alternative. She also shared power with, I believe, her husband, yes?
Yes, and so I don't really know why. I don't know if it's a human cultural thing. It seems to also maybe even be the case with Drakes, because I know Drakes, like, their military so far is like, I believe they have female and male units like pretty equally, but in leadership positions, I believe for like the military, all I really can recall mostly is males. There was a few exceptions.
Okay, so before you go down that, so Kel is commenting that there are comments made about how humans don't seem to like ladies with power, and Zevera, Watch Captain Zevera of Liscor, explicitly thinks about how male and female watch captains are viewed differently if they raise their voice. There is also mention of Nawal and the I can't pronounce it, but essentially the Bedouin folk of Chandrar and how they're treated differently. There is a more nasty version of this when we think about Roshal, their treatment of male and female slaves and how they're interacted with. I think the first discussion of how, I believe the original question was, let me just check this. The original question was that why does it seem to exist on Terra? It doesn't. It does exist everywhere. There are variations and levels that we are allowed to view, and I think Pirate has done a good job of peppering it, but sometimes in something like this, it can be missed. One of the other two questions that was directly asked: what was your reaction to the transition between Ryoka being restrained and terrified to quickly, boldly confronting Rasvari? I think, Asteria, do you want to clarify that question and tell us what exactly, like, what was your impression? What did you think of it, and why did you ask the question?
Oh, so I guess just I was interested to see if what people thought of the transition of Ryoko going from basically terrified, she's exhausted because she's been chased all day, she's basically petrified of this demon kind of out of her nightmares, and then suddenly, like, it seems almost like a few minutes later, she's boldly confronting these, two immortals and flying off into the air. And it was just such an about face.
I'm gonna get
That turned me
personal.
out of the chapter, so I was just curious to see what people thought of that.
Okay, I'm gonna give you my impression, if you don't mind, before Gunman goes, and Lynette can go right after. I'm gonna give you a personal story about this. So I know a woman who was mugged in New York City personally. She got beat in the face. She was just walking home. Her purse got stolen. She came home. It was really late at night. Knocked on the door. She was terrified. And she cried and was scared, and I helped her out. And then right afterwards, the very next day, she got up and went back to work. And went back to the same route, the same stuff, despite it being terrifying and her not... And she just went back to work. Even the suggestion that this person would maybe not go to work or report... I mean, we did try to report to the police. Well, that's a whole different story. But I think that's what Pirate was trying to go for, this kind of strength, human, like the personal strength. I don't know if that was it, but that's what I thought of. So for me, it wasn't a thing. So we're going to go in order. There's a lot of reactions to this, so we're going to go in order here. I have, who else? Who was just before Lynette? Oh, Lynette, go ahead. Oh, Gunman, go ahead, and then we'll go Lynette.
I will agree. The only thing that seemed odd was the lack of showing the mental transition from terrified to confident and daring. If that had been included, I think it would have been fine. But what I got from that is that this was the reaffirming that Ryoka has needed, or that Ryoka goes through almost every single time she does this dance with immortals, is that she learns how they act, she learns what kind of games they play, as it were, and she has to figure out her own way to rise up to that challenge and show that she can stand on that same playing field. In this case, having that entire castle-wide game of tag and having all of the servants, all of the staff, and...
Well, let's be fair. The male servants and the male staff, the impression was that there were some women involved, but mostly it was men. Right?
Yeah, but doing that, like, yes, I will admit, yes, that is a very guy-ish thing to do. I had a fair bit of that when I was young. But in the end of the day, what was terrifying wasn't so much as everyone coming after, but more like the scale of it. It was just something Ryoka has never encountered before. It was an entirely new immortal game, as it were, which was only compounded by the fact that he was, in her mind, like, she was still in that panic state of, oh my god, that's the devil, run away. So I think the gender thing was more like a secondary or tertiary concern, all things considered. I think it's not as important as it might be made out to be.
Okay. Lynette?
I agree with Gunman about the gender thing and that part being secondary or tertiary, because what really was keeping Ryoka grounded, what was keeping her from fighting back, because you got to remember, she's always fought back. She's always been a rebel and has sassed anyone she felt like sassing, even if it ended up going badly. She'll sass her parents. It doesn't matter how much pull that they might have. But she was not allowing herself to fuck up her own situation by reacting the way she normally would. So she avoided the confrontation instead, and the running and the pursuing and the mental thing also of, oh crap, this is a devil, affected the way that entire day went. I think the dichotomy that everybody's seeing about how did she suddenly go to something so bold and audacious as to stand up? No, she's always stood up. What was weird for her was the terror. I've never seen Ryoka this scared before. I've seen her run away, but she's usually running away from herself or from her problems. I've never seen her this scared of something else. And that part right there was understandable from a weakened, vulnerable position that she had put herself into. She could get out of the vulnerable position if she was willing to flee Aelin Damas, but she isn't, because Aaron's more important than her fear.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good point. Neil, you're up next. Neil?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. For me, the big thing that made it seem appropriate, the sudden about face, because I will acknowledge it's very sudden, but fear and panic has a inertia. So she was initially scared, she panicked, she ran, and she never got a moment to recover from that mentally. He kept on her, he kept pressure, the panic stayed there, she wasn't responding rationally, and she stayed in that panic state. Once that inertia was broken by the queen, and she had a moment to calm down, collect herself, think about the situation, come up with a plan, deal with the situation, then she boldly did it. To me, that was what was really important, was the breaking of that inertia.
Okay.
She could not have done something that bold or that brash in the moment during the chase because she was terrified out of her mind. Once that was broken, once she was given a chance to recover, that was when she could take actions like that.
Okay. Lem, you're up.
Alright, I sort of missed the scary part, or just didn't perceive it as such. Like, I felt she just got caught up in the whole stereotype of what dealing with the devil meant on Earth, and that image of it more so than actual trauma. Like, like in the moment, I can see how people can bring or relate to it in a way when they have personal experiences that sort of align with that type of stuff. But in the grand scheme of things, the level of punishment she took from other immortals, like, this is minor stuff, and I can definitely see how she just brushed it off afterwards. Or, like people said, maybe there's like a delay to the reaction, or maybe we just blow past it. Like, I also attribute a part of that just to the fact that it's like written without the second draft, so maybe the timing is slightly off, or maybe there wasn't the time to put in the extra reaction bit where like days have to go by where she gets over it and stuff. Like it has a different I want to say it has a different feeling to it, like, say, I don't know, the Aaron thing.
Yeah, I get that. Before I let Mr. Europe start talking, something Disconator commented reminded me. One of the things that Ryoka is noted for is her particularly strong will. And, oh god, I feel very much stereotypical to say this, but her very Asian way of, like, you take all the stress and you pour it all the way down into a tiny corner, push it down, and keep moving. There's another thing. So why don't you go ahead, Mr. Europe?
Yeah, I totally agree with Neil that she was always off balance, and she never recovered throughout the entire chase. But I also think that like her reaction between when she changes her mind between getting chased and confronting them. I think that was explained later in the chapter at the end when she notes that she saw him look guilty, and she saw that she thought that's not the reaction of a evil monster. That's the reaction of a person, possibly a very good person, a good person, and that's why she could change her stance and change her view so easily.
Okay.
Her idea of what this crazy devil was like, she realized that was wrong, and she could recenter herself pretty easily.
In response to BZM3R's thing about the Asian cult, I know it's not typical. It's me. That's my impression, not necessarily what strong types or don't. I'm just. That's why I paused to say I'm being super evil right now. Okay, Yash Ketchum, you wanted to say something, so I'll mute and go ahead and.
Okay, so I think someone mentioned over here about how it was very very empowered after the Queen intervened, and maybe it was the beginning of the invasion. I feel that maybe it was empowering to see a queen or somebody, a female in power basically, put down people who were putting her down. Does that make sense?
Like in an inspirational moment, in fact, like it brought back the idea that yes, she still has power. Actually, that's exactly what I thought, and I was going to mention at the end. I agree totally.
Yeah, I felt like she has someone backing her. She has someone in her corner.
Right.
And she was like, okay, then I can do it.
That sense of yeah, that sense of support that you get when somebody stands up for you and with you as much as anything else, right?
Exactly. Like it was like a smaller Me Too, you could say.
Yeah, a smaller hashtag. Yeah, me too. That's a really cool perspective. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and like the whole bit slapping with the
Oh, that was just fun.
that was just badass.
That was just badass. Yeah.
Everybody would snap out of their terror and everything. Like. So, like I just feel like the entire concept of having more people stand behind you, because she was alone, literally alone. There was nobody else in it. Everybody was in the game. She was the target of everybody, and there was one lady willing to stand up for her, and everyone bowed up to her. So that is what I think.
That's good.
Pulled her out of.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm sorry, I'm rushing you a little bit, but I'm trying to get to the next question. My apologies. Okay.
Can I do one?
Who's that? Did you?
Lem here.
Oh, you Lem. Go ahead.
Is that about like female empowerment, or is that a thing about like classes, the power she wields as a queen, more so than her being female?
I think it was a bit of both, because you have to look at it from. I'll let Yash Ketchum tell you about that, if you want to respond to him.
I think it was specifically about a female being empowered.
Yeah, it felt like the scene was structured so that if you recall, earlier in the chapter, the way Pirate set it up was she was like enticed into coming into the situation, because normally she wouldn't care, right? Except Pirate set it up so that there was an impetus from the rumors she was hearing about her interaction with Itoran to entice her into coming into the situation. I think Pirate explicitly wanted it to be a female who stood up for
Exactly.
Yeah?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because if it was Turin, she would have just been another. It would have been like, okay, I can't do this myself.
Yeah, she needed a guy to help her, right?
I need someone. Yeah, I need a guy to come and help me, because only a guy can stand up to another guy, and that's not the message of.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
It's important that it be the queen, not even the knights, because the knights are not shown to be very feminine. I think that queen from the get-go was shown to possess a lot of feminine traits and promote feminine traits, like wearing the dress, behaving femininely,
having an etiquette, like she's noted to be very like touchy about etiquette and things like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And so
I'm gonna have to cough you. I'm sorry. I got you off, but yeah. Next up, I really do apologize, but I want to get to more of the questions, and we're already an hour in. So, what was the next? I'm gonna pick up Gunman's question. So his question was, why aren't there any... Oh, wait. Did I forget something from Asteria's question? Yes. How would the moonlight scene change if it had been told primarily from Ryoka's perspective, rather than from Viscount Visofison? Does anyone have an answer to that? Mine is, I don't think it would have changed all that much. Ryoka has a very particular way to think of things. I don't know. It felt like, it also felt like, wasn't it like a mid-scene swap between the two perspectives? It was more of a weird third-person, pirate-y kind of way to manage the scene. Anyone got any opinions? Oh, go ahead.
This is another one where I'm kind of getting at, like, more about, like, the way that it's told. I felt that this was kind of a weaker scene. It had good elements, but once again, Ryoga's transition in her mindset to this not trusting him to being a devil temptress, I just didn't get the jump. And so it wasn't necessarily that it was from Vicky's perspective, it was more of a third person thing, and I'm just wondering if it had been told from Ryoga's perspective, would it have been stronger, different, or just what people's takes are on that?
Anyone got anything? Because I unfortunately don't. So I don't think there would have been much of a difference. But not for me. Okay. We're going to move on. Gunman. So here's your question. Where is it?
Yes.
Why aren't there any Angelum in Aelin Damas's collection of immortals? Could they be hiding in the cities Risvari mentioned? Because the aesthetic of the land of puffy clouds, where angelic beings reside, sounds like the tie-in with heaven and earth's religions. Go ahead, Gunman. Why did you ask the question? What's it all about?
Well, since this was a chapter to expand upon the races of immortals, and just with the single word of Visofferson mentioning Angelum, effectively his racial counterpart, as it were, I was wondering why it is that you have one but not the other. Like, did they happen to be wiped out who knows how long ago, or are they just hiding, kind of like the treants under the oceans? And if they're hiding somewhere, where on earth would they be? Because I'm trying to think, like, how would you match it up with Earth's cultures and whatnot, and the only thing I could think of was those cities in the sky, which, if you're going to have a city in the sky, chances are it's probably made of clouds, and angelic people living on clouds. That sounds kind of like the tie-in to the themes of heaven from Christian mythology. Or maybe I'm being a little bit overreactive in my thoughts and I jumped the gun.
I don't.
Pun intended.
I don't think you are. That does seem like an. Is Jarmara trying to speak? I'm not sure. His thing is lit up. All right. Does anyone have anything to say about that and an answer to the question? If you want to ping, I will bring you up.
Disco here.
Okay.
So yeah, I agree with the theory that Angelum probably have something to do with the sky cities, especially since they were also mentioned in this chapter. Also, I know some people brought up on the main Discord that the death of Wings might possibly be Angelum. It's a bit of a crack theory. Yeah, it's a bit of a crack theory at the moment. I think it makes some sense, especially with the thematic idea of having an angel working with demons.
The fallen
I think that's like Angelum, angel adjacent, working with demon adjacent. That I think is a possibility for where these people might be, or they may never show up. Who knows?
Okay. Well, I don't know why there aren't any Angelum, but the implication seems to be that they're all dead. Like, they're all dead. The what's left is the ones who managed to make it. That's my feeling, Gunman. It's that they could be hiding. There could be cities. I think Pirates hinted more than once that there are cities hidden in the cloud, and there's more in the giant spaces up there. But I don't know that. I think if they're not there already, they're probably dead. Dado had a theory. They could have died to the gods. That could be true too. It definitely could have happened. Next question we're gonna get to is Neil's. Neil asks, now that Phthia and the Immortals of Elendamis have been introduced, do you think Ryoka will bring them into the plot lines going on elsewhere? Could she connect Phthia, for example, to Hidalt and his wand? How would they do this? What could the Immortals offer the other people in the other continents? I thought a lot about this. It's been brought up by a few people. There is a possibility that Ryoka could give the vampires in Israel haven within Elendamis. I mean, if they're okay with people being eaten, they could definitely give refuge to them. They could give refuge to the last of the dragon children and let them be raised in safety. And they would be around people who would not die, guys. One of the biggest issues for the two little dragon kids, why am I calling them little? But the two dragon children is that they are alone. They feel alone. Well, here's a kingdom filled with other kids who are just as immortal as you, who will not be dying anytime soon. What would that do to Teriarch, who has experienced so many other unions like this? Is this perhaps a different way of doing this? Maybe. Does anyone have a comment on this? Any ideas?
Yeah, Mr. Europe.
Go ahead.
Mr. Europe. The problem with bringing vampires in, I think, and why they might not go for it is that unlike the Lucifen are compelled to make deals and eat a human once a month, but the vampires are compelled to snack on high-level and impressive people. I think that's a bit more chaotic than the Immortals are willing to risk.
Are you sure about that? Because they have the life that was shown to us of vampires who have sort of figured out a way to exist without having to consume human blood in large degrees. Yeah, Dado, I see it. Let me just get through this.
Yeah, but those are the poison vampires. The only proper vampire we've seen, Fier, had to run away at one point when there were too many impressive people in the same place, because she felt the urge to snack on people.
She did.
Possibly bang them.
But bang them? Whoa! All right. So Dado,
she's definitely looking at that throat with, just hunger, definitely. Just
Dado, you're up. You had a couple of comments.
Yeah, Dado here. Well, first thing about the vampires I wanted to bring up, it seems like, and I don't have the exact quote on hand in the chapter, but the Lucifen had to make a case for themselves. It seems like when certain immortals come, they have to actually be approved into Elendamis. It's not like, oh, you're immortal, come on in. It seems like they had to make an agreement and had to prove themselves. And I don't know if vampires would be able to, or, I mean, they don't really seem to have, a main vampire leader. They could take pity on them, but the Lucifen seem to have a lot more to offer power and knowledge-wise than vampires. The taking in... taking in the Lucifen adds to Elendamis' strength. Adding vampires is almost like...
I'm not sure that it's as dangerous as people think, but yeah, that's a fair point that it would be a dangerous aspect. Did someone else speak while I was speaking over them? Lynette, did you say something? No?
I'm waiting for my go.
Okay, I didn't see any more pings, so if you want to go, Lynette, go ahead.
I pinged you 10 minutes ago.
Oh my god. I'm sorry, the chat is moving very fast. Apologies. Go ahead.
So, about the question as far as what can the Immortals, this was Neil's question, yes?
Yes, Neil's question.
I'm sorry, can you, we talked several different things since the question got asked. Can you say it again?
Now that Phthia and the Immortals of Aelan have been introduced, do you think that Ryoka will bring them into the plot lines going on elsewhere? Could she connect Phthia, for example, to Hidalt and his wand? How would they do this? What could the Immortals offer to anyone being brought in to Aelan?
So Terry's not wrong in that if you get just a hero and an army large enough, they could kill him. It doesn't matter how old he is or how strong he is or what he knows. You can overwhelm them. So I can understand wanting to be isolated so that you live. But the problem that I'm also seeing with the Viscount is that if you isolate yourself and remove yourself from the influence of the mortals, you stop caring about them. And that's not a great way to also get them to care about you. If Ryoka, this is a hopeful possibility on my end because I'm an optimist. Damn it, I want to see the good in people. If we can actually get the Immortals involved with different factions of the mortal world and slowly spread the idea that, hey, this isn't like the Dragon Wars and they're not trying to enslave us all, then maybe we actually could all live together. That would be great, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
Yeah, Erin has her own sanctuary, see?
Yeah, Erin does have her own literal sanctuary, as Kel has just stated, in very capital letters. Okay, so yes, it is an interesting... It is... Dado comments that it's also... Neil, you can jump in, but just beforehand, Dado comments, it's also concerning that Rosvari killed his own kind out of greed. He might go against everyone if he sees better profit for himself. My personal rebuttal to that is, it happened beforehand, before he established this conclave, and I'm pretty sure he's too invested to do that. Neil, go ahead, and then we're going to move on to another question. I'm trying to move a little bit faster. I apologize if I don't get to everybody. Please ping if you want to speak and say what question you want to comment on, so at least I can track who asked for what. Go ahead, Neil.
Yes. So, a lot of interesting takes on the question. But it got into a lot of the details on individuals and how they would interact or work in. But one of the big things I didn't really see come up that I was thinking about is both negative and positive. Not just necessarily how could we work this in well, just how will it come into the story, such as the Hidalt living wand that has a very powerful seed in it. If Ryoka, who does know about that, brings that up to Phthia, it could be anywhere from creating peaceful links between Alandimus and Israel when she gets involved with someone in Israel, to her trying to influence Alandimus into a war in order to get a hold of that wand. And that's not the only link, but I saw a lot of potentials both on the negative and positive side of her being able to
link
these individuals to the story.
Neil, can you give us a straight up example of like a negative way you think this would go? Like what terrible thing could happen? I mean, I can think of a few, but let's see what you, as the original question asker, what did you think was going to go wrong?
So, for a example of a terrible thing, just because the thought of it fascinates me so much, I'll stick with the Hidalt's wand. If Phthia thinks that seed could bring back the ancient forests that she remembers, she wouldn't hold back literally anything. She would use every bit of power and influence she has in Aelan to get a hold of that. Especially if she thinks there's a potential she could bring back the intelligent dryads with the seed.
Why do you think that's a possibility?
Full-scale invasion.
Why do you think that's a possibility? My impression of the wand was that the seed was consumed in the creation of the wand itself.
Because of what Ivaleth said back when it was getting looked at by Hito. The way Ivaleth described it was not that it is dead or consumed, but that it was in stasis.
Okay. So you think that there's a possibility that this wand could become I don't want to say it's a MacGuffin, but it could be a contention or a piece of a puzzle that we don't quite see, and that Pirate has seeded this, no pun intended.
I think there's a possible tie-in, and I don't know if it's an intentional thing. It's just a potential that has really captured my imagination.
Okay, that's a really interesting. Let's see, what's the next question up? Or if we're good with this, and Mr. Europe. Here's Mr. Europe's question for all of us. Would you prefer Aelindamis to back off or to win? If they win, would you want to see the Marquin family be absorbed into Aelindamis or exile themselves to Israel? This is clearly in reference to the war between Aelindamis and the Dawn Concordant, and I'm guessing he's trying to say, what would you prefer? Do you think it would be better for those kingdoms to be absorbed into Aelindamis or not? Okay, Lem, go ahead.
Those aren't the only two options, right?
What? Well, that's his version of the.
I mean, obviously they could also be executed or they could be exiled. I'm just talking about like the.
Why wouldn't you execute them?
Why would you execute them?
They're just done with and gone.
The way Aelindamis' war system works, they try to avoid that kind of unnecessary death. Princesses and kings are killed. No, I mean the system itself. The treaty system that they've developed and the implication of Tarandrian nobility, the way they structure things, is that kings are what's the word? Not subsumed. What is the word?
They just make war and then decide who's
vassalized.
Vassalized. Thank you, Gunman. Thank you. Very. What's that game Paradox has? Not Command and Conquer. God, I can't remember things.
Crusader Kings?
Crusader Kings, yes. Very Crusader Kings. Lem, go ahead.
Right, but that, like, at least the king and the queen are dead.
I could see that, yes. Well, even there, I don't necessarily think so, because I believe there is another, like, Aelindamis could make you a vassal. You could be effectively independent, but they can bind you with magical bindings and oaths that you give that force you to obey the king of Aelindamis as if you were, and then you cannot name an heir, and instead the king names the heir. It's very much how the Persian system worked with satraps, and the system worked on the Indian subcontinent with the Mughal Empire and stuff. Hold on. So we have Dado.
So
go ahead.
Just a quick for the question. I also didn't include "they all die" as a
they all die
answer because I thought it was a boring answer.
It is a little
example.
Discinator, you can react while I try and figure out who's asking questions.
Okay, I was going to say, I think when you were saying, "Would you rather this happen?" I'm an optimist at also some things, and I can't personally get behind I'm going to war with people without a lot more justification than that. So I think I can just immediately go, no, I don't want Aelindamis to just win. I want to clarify that, though, a little bit, and say that, and so I was thinking about my reaction to that and then going, Aelindamis has some reasonably decent domestic policies going on. So if they amended their strategy to appeal to the people of the kingdoms that they're conquering, going, we can do this better, and get support behind them.
Hegemony rather than empire? Sorry, I'm talking over you, but hegemony rather than empire.
That was pretty much my two-part thought there.
Yeah, so you're describing a hegemony over an empire? Something equivalent to how the United States runs so much of the world and how Britain used to do it pre pre the current modern era or whatever. So Blues, the moderator from the Discord, is asking a question, a very small one, as a topic break from these really interesting but deep questions. What do the Angelum eat? What do you guys think they eat?
The Gellum. There's no food cake.
Yeah, the what was the name of the devil race? Someone help me out here.
Lucifin.
The Lucifin. So the Lucifin eat people. Do you think the Angelum eat people too? Because in traditional mythology, angels are ineffable and very much not nice. I mean, I've rarely seen depictions of them as kind, except in Chicken Soup for the Soul and, the TV series where angels come, and that one was great.
Isn't it Angelum?
Angelum. I can't.
There's no N.
Angelum? Sure. Angelum it is. So...
I'm a fan of a Gellum.
Okay, well, let's not get bogged down into that. Do you think that they eat people too, just in a different context?
I think you said that they were extinct, so I don't think we have to worry about it.
I didn't think we had to either. Nabisco, you wanted to say something?
Well, I'm not sure. Maybe they photosynthesize.
Maybe they photosynthesize. Okay, that's an interesting idea.
Well, then Death of Wings should be green.
That was Courier
Maybe
for
like how the Lucifin eat. They specifically said that they eat bones and tissue, right? They eat the body.
Right.
So maybe the Angelum, whatever it is, eat like emotions.
They
right?
eat brains. They literally eat brains.
Well, so from what I've seen, I see it as kind of like a reflection where, because you kind of see, because their Lucifins is based on the devil, and Angel are based on angels. I could see it where it's like a reflection where, like pointed out previously, the devils, they eat the physical, and the Angelum eat the emotional or the soul, almost. They could be feeding off emotions or experiences of some sort.
Alabaster is compare. What did you compare them to, Alabaster?
The mentors?
Alabaster? Okay, I guess he doesn't want to speak.
Thinking of that Harry Potter reference.
You're talking about... Okay, so... Alright, BZM...
The devils eat people one day of the month. Clearly the angelic eat people every day of the month except one.
So BZM3R, the Lucifins might be fallen angels if we go by Earth mythologies. In which case the Angelum eat what Lucifin eat?
That's solid logic.
So that's a solid logic. Base species. Yeah, they could be the same base species, but a variant of each other, and they could still be both eating people. Okay, I think we're enough with the cannibalism predation questions. We're gonna move on. Frickin' Blues and his craziness. Let's see. That was Neil, Mr. Europe, Gunman. Lynette had a question. Which Obol, Obols being the currency that Ryoka received from Oberon, do you think Ryoka showed Viscount Bicificin? What other types of Obol might there be? This was in reference to the scene in which Fethia was interacting with Ryoka and they were talking, and she let Fethia hold the rune that was for the earth, I believe, and she said it made her felt alive. Do you guys think that there might be more interactions for immortals to this kind of magic? Okay, there's a lot of this is supposed to be a spoken thing, so come on, guys, talk to me instead of spamming the chat with 400.
How many have we seen so far then?
3.
Take it off.
We've seen fire, earth, and air.
Yeah, fire, earth, and air. We've seen. I'm getting Hell's suggesting heart. Courier's got metal. BZM3R is suggesting lust. Asteria is suggesting space. Do you think
we saw winter?
What? Sorry, Dado, say again?
We're talking about the elements, right?
Right, we did see the elements, but they're suggesting that these are the type of energies that could be contained in other Obol, rather than the ones that we've seen.
Because I was going to say, haven't we also seen winter?
Did we see a winter Obol? I don't remember that.
I don't remember a winter.
Or like an ice or of some sort. I thought. Are we talking about the currency itself?
Yeah, remember the currency had runes carved
So
into them?
I imagine there'd be winter, because doesn't winter have its own color in the story?
I guess.
There's the Ice Fae coloration. So,
Well, my
So I
question,
imagine there has to be one of them.
my question was more along the lines of, okay, what do you think she pulled out in order to show him that she thought he might want? Also, oh, well, maybe, but also, is it only elements? Is it only physical things that embody that particular thing, or are concepts also a potential oval?
Do we know how many that she was given, like a set number?
We have no clue.
Shit.
They are very much shrouded in the mystery of Pirate doesn't want to do numbers.
I thought she got 3.
No, she got
a lot.
way more than 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, way more than 3. That much we know.
Well,
Like, there was a pile.
I mean, it depends, because so far, some of the elements themselves that we've been pointing out seem conceptual. Like, death, in my opinion, is conceptual in regards to how it is as an element. Same thing with life.
She definitely only just juggled 3, but I think it was pretty explicit that she could wear all of her oval, and there was a lot of it. Dozens, yeah.
She saw dozens.
Yeah, she saw dozens. There was a hefty pile right there.
The lewd oval.
Yeah, the lewd. Okay, so I think that covers all of the questions, unless anyone else has anything more to say about the subics. I did have a question for everybody. This is less about the chapter and more about the discussion stuff. We're at the end, essentially. I went over by 20 minutes, but that should be fine. What did you guys think of today's discussion? Was there anything that, bugged you? And is there any chance one of you could volunteer to help me run this stuff? Because I cannot manage and speak at the same time. Who is I can?
Dado.
I love that you said I can as if I know you.
International
It's like
Corporation
we're
is
gonna
signing
get
the number.
like, you mean, lead conversation? Or
Well, no,
do other
it
stuff?
doesn't have to be lead since it's a group conversation. I just need administrator, like managing the chat, figuring out who wants to speak when, and giving each other a chance. I can't quite cover everything at the same time. I am not a computer. I wish I was.
I'd be fine with that.
Okay, so come talk to me later if you guys feel like it. But yes, that's it for the official recorded portion of this discussion. Thank you for coming to this post-chapter reaction discussion Halloween day. And I guess, as Kel said, enough with the cannibalism, guys. Enough with the cannibalism. All right, we're going to end the recording.
Patreon payment day.
Not that we're not